Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're keeping sane in these crazy days. Right, Rory Holiday, the physiotherapist here. I'm going to be doing a little bit of Pilates for you. A few people have requested it, so let's give it a go. These are some of the exercises I often teach face-to-face in my clinic. So we're going to stitch them all together, make them into a little bit of a class, something nice and basic, very much a beginner's session. If you often do Pilates, it's worth doing this anyway because you know what, you might learn something new that you haven't learned before. And if you've never done it before, this is a perfect starting level for you. In time, we'll make it a little bit harder and we'll see where we get to. Okay, so you're going to need two things. You're going to need a mat or a towel to lie on. You're going to need a hand towel for your head. That's all. Right, up into standing first of all. So the first thing we're going to do is find a standing neutral position. And this is just basically standing in good posture. So I want you to imagine that you've got a big helium balloon attached to the crown of the head. And that helium balloon's pulling you tall through the crown up towards the ceiling. As it does so, it pulls the chin inwards a little bit. So it flattens the back of the neck a touch, gives you a touch of a double chin. And you're just going to maintain that there. Not so that you're straining, but just so that you feel a little bit taller. We're going to set the shoulder blades gently down and back. It opens the chest, collarbones feel a little bit wider. Maintain that position. Again, nice and easy, doesn't need to be forced. Stay in that position. We're now going to move down to the pelvis. Hands on the pelvis, fingers at the front, thumbs around the back. You're going to imagine that your pelvis is like a bucket full of water. You're going to tip water out the front of that bucket. You're going to tip it out the back of the bucket. And as you tip forwards and backwards, you'll get an idea of what your full range of movement is. Find the halfway position, that halfway point is going to be what we call our neutral position. There shall be a shallow curve in the back in this position. For some of you, it's where you naturally stand anyway. For some of you, you might have to change your position a little bit to find it. We'll keep coming back to that neutral position time and time again. So practice it, learn how to find it, and we're going to just hold that there in standing. Now, from here, we're going to try and do a little bit of work to find a center balance point for your feet. So we've got helium balloon, shoulder blades down and back, slight neutral lumbar spine with a couple of pelvic tilts. From there, just allow your weight to sway forwards very gently onto the balls of the feet, gently back toward the heels, and just get an idea of how far you can sway without feeling like you need to change any other things. We don't want you to have to step forwards, we don't want you to have to step backwards. And once you've done a few of these, I want you to find that midpoint, equal weight bearing through the ball of the foot and the heel at the same time. It might feel like you're leaning forwards a little bit, particularly if you normally stand back on your heels a lot, which a lot of us do. It might feel like you're leaning forwards, but find that equal weight bearing position and we're going to maintain that there. Okay, so once we've got that in place, helium balloon, shoulder blades set down, neutral pelvis, equal weight bearing through the feet. We're then going to do a little exercise called a vertical hip release. We're going to be bending hips, knees and ankles at the same time. What I want you to think about here is keeping the shoulders over the hips, by which I mean you're not going to let the shoulders come in front of the hips. We're not going to let the hips come in front of the shoulders. So we've got a vertical plumb line through the shoulder and hip as we bend at the hip, ankle and knee. Now you can put your hands across your chest if you want to, although you don't need to. You can see me a little clearer if I do. So we're letting the knees bend, but to do that, the hips have got to bend a little bit as well. Sometimes you bend the knees and you end up leaning backwards. Sometimes you bend the knees and you overdo it at the hips and you end up leaning forwards like you're squatting. This isn't that deep. It's only a couple of inches, gently up and down. Okay, so let's do a few of those. And as you do this, just stay relaxed. Imagine that helium balloon is just allowing you to lower and it's lifting you back up. It's almost like it's just bobbing you along and you're not having to put any effort in. Keep that equal weight distribution through the forefoot and the heel. So don't let yourself lean back onto the heels. Don't let yourself lean too far forward onto the balls of the feet. And we'll do another one of those. And then we'll have a little bit of a relax. Okay, all right, just have a rest for a moment. Okay, now we're going to move on to an exercise I call the archer. It's going to be some rotational movement for the body. Again, helium balloon, shoulder blades, neutral lumbar spine, equal weight bearing through the feet, and then we're going to allow the knees to bend a little bit. We're going to take both hands out in front of us and almost like we're pulling a string back on a bow, turn the body away, but I still want you to look forward towards the hand. Okay, so my torso is now turning to face that way. Slowly bring that back in. Bring it back the other way. Slowly bring that back in. And from the side, what this should look like is that the torso is moving. And as that happens, the hips can move a little bit as well. Don't worry about trying to keep those still. Allow the whole body to rotate. Looking forward at the hand as you move it. Bring it back. Looking forward to the hand as you rotate. Let it come back. And we're going to do a few of those. Now, I've not talked about breathing here. Keep breathing, that's good. But try and breathe in time with your movement. Ideally breathing out as you start the movement, breathing in as you bring it back. Sometimes it ends up being the other way around. That's fine, we're not going to get hung up on that. We're going to do a couple more. Turning that torso. Last one. And then we're going to have a little bit of a rest there. Okay, now we're going to do an exercise called a roll down here. I'm going to stand back a little bit so you can see me. So this is bending forwards, but we're going to be bending forwards through the whole of the spine and then the hips. A lot of us bend forwards just with the back, and then we end up getting back pain. Some of us have learned to do sort of the gym deadlift type bending forward, so we don't move the back at all, we do it all through the hips. This is going to be a share of movement through the whole of the spine and the hips. We're going to start at the top. And I want you to visualize your spine one vertebra at a time. We're going to move down the spine like we're undoing a zip. We're going to let the hands rest on the front of the thighs. We're going to pop the chin down into the chest. Shoulder blades roll forwards so that we feel like the top of the spine is bending. And then as we keep going forwards, we go into the middle of the back and then the lower back. And as the lower back begins to bend, think about taking your tailbone, your coccyx, and sticking it up towards the ceiling so the hamstrings get a good stretch. Chin stays tucked in toward your chest so you're looking between your legs. Taking it down as far as you feel comfortable, and then we're going to reverse out of that, tucking the tailbone under and slowly stacking one vertebra at a time on top of the one below it until we are fully upright, back into that neutral standing position. Repeat it over, chin into chest. Shoulder blades roll forwards, bending between the shoulder blades, working that movement down the back. As the lower back bends, tilt that pelvis so the hamstrings get a good stretch into the back of the legs. Soften the knees a little bit if it helps. And then we're going to come back out of that position. Tucking that tailbone under rather. Slowly bringing that spine back up. Last repetition. This is going to be the one that takes us onto the floor and onto your mat. So standing at the end of your mat or towel, chin into your chest, slowly working it down, one vertebra at a time, so sticking that tailbone up towards the ceiling to stretch the hamstrings, and then we're going to allow the knees to bend, so we're crouching down, hands down, onto our knees, walking the hands forwards until we're into this 4-point kneeling position. Okay, so this is what I mean by 4-point kneeling. Both hands, both knees. We've got shoulders over wrists, we've got hips over knees, by which I mean we haven't got the hands too far forwards and we haven't got them too far back. We want a nice square position. Okay, I'm going to keep my chest lifted up between my shoulder blades. My face, other than when I'm looking at you, my face is going to be looking at the space between my hands with my chin tucked up in towards the throat. My toes are going to be relaxed away if my ankles and feet will cope with it. If you get cramp in your toes, just turn them under. Okay. And then from there, the last thing to position ourselves is our pelvic tilt. A lot of us will get into this position and we will be too deep in the back. We'll have a deep curve, tailbone stuck right up to the ceiling. Some of us will do it and will be quite rounded. I want you to find that halfway position. So we're going to do a couple of those pelvic tilts. Find that halfway position with a shallow curve in the lower back, that neutral position. And we're going to hold that there. Now, a couple of little points of imagination. Imagine you have a football balanced in that small curve in the lower back. Keep that there, you're not going to let it move. Alternatively, imagine you've got a big tray of drinks sat on your back, full of water, close together. I don't want to hear them chinking, I don't want you to spill any water out of the glasses. So you've got to keep them dead still. And what we're going to try and do is take the weight off the left hand. I think that might be my right hand as you look at it. We're going to lift that gently off, reach it out ahead of you without any sense that you're leaning backwards or to the side that you're supporting with. Bring that hand back down and then we're going to go with the other side. Reaching out, and we're trying to keep that neutral lumbar spine position. That tray of drinks does not move. That football in the lower back does not move. We reach out, we bring it back in. So we're going to time it with our breathing. Remember, we breathe out as we reach away, breathing in as we bring the movement back in. Breathing out as we reach away, breathing in as we come back in. Trying to keep everything really still, other than the arm that you're moving. So it's easy to do it if you allow yourself to lean. It's easy to do it if you allow yourself to lean backwards, but we're not going to allow that. We're going to keep everything nice and still, and you might just feel a little bit of tension in the lower abdominals. You might feel a little bit of something going on around your rib cage as this happens, and that's just muscles working to stabilise you. I have not said anything about tucking tummy muscles up, squeezing pelvic floors or clenching buttocks. Try and let these muscles work as automatically as possible, and if we get ourselves into a pretty decent position to start with, they generally do that work if we're pitching it at the right level. Okay, one more on each side. Breathing out as we reach out, breathing in as we come in. Last one, and then we're going to have a little bit of a rest there. Now, you can let yourself relax down, do a few shrugs between the shoulders, let the chest drop. If you want to, even do a little bit of a roll back just to stretch the lower back a touch. And now we're going to do very much the same movements, but using the legs. Now this is where, if you're on a slidey floor, it works quite nicely. I'm going to move my mat just to demonstrate this. So rather than having your feet on the mat, you can have your feet just on the floor. I'm going to set myself again in 4-point kneeling, chest up, face looking down, neutral lumbar spine, and I'm going to take the weight off my left knee, and I'm going to slide my toes very gently away, just on that left foot. Okay, and I'm not going to let that tray of drinks or that football move. Now you have to be quite stealthy with this one as you slide the knee away and as you slide it back under, because what would be quite easy to do is to lift your hip to get that knee out and lift it up to get it back in. I want you to keep that nice and still, almost like you've got a spirit level across the pelvis. You're not going to allow that to move. Now, that's the easy version. Slightly harder is taking the foot off the floor altogether. Don't worry about getting it too high there, because it just causes that back to cave in. Okay, so let's think about that neutral lumbar spine, and as you take that leg away, just reaching for the wall behind you, sliding back in. Trying not to go forwards with the body as the leg goes back. Shoulders stay still, chest stays lifted. One more on each side, and then when we've done that, we're going to change position. Okay, very good. Now, we're going to have a lay back down on our back now. So have a lay down on your back with your head on your towel, and we're going to go to one of my favourites, the shoulder bridge. We can use a shoulder bridge for all sorts of things. This one we're going to be using it to target the glutes, but what I'm not going to be saying is tense your glutes or squeeze your bum or anything like that. These are going to do it by themselves with this exercise. So knees are bent with the heels relatively close to your bum. Not as close as you can get them, but not far off, okay? Heads on your towel, chin lightly tucked in, shoulder blades gently set back, and then we're going to do a few of those pelvic tilts, just tilting the pelvis forwards and backwards. And when we find that neutral position, that halfway position with a shallow curve, it's like you could maybe just get your hand under your back here, but only just. So it's a very, very shallow curve. But that's going to just stay there to begin with. Now, we're going to move swiftly on to get the pelvis moving. So we're going to tilt the pelvis back so that curve now flattens into the floor and your tailbone feels like it's being pointed up towards the ceiling. And just by doing that, if you put your hands on your bum muscles, you'll feel that that engages the muscles. And we only want them engaged the amount that they need to be to start that movement. So they don't need to be tensed up any more than that. So tilt the tailbone up, and then I want you to think about lifting one vertebrae at a time from the bottom around the belt level at a time, peeling your spine away from the floor. And we're only going to go halfway up. So if I put my hand under my back, I can still feel that some of my ribs are on the floor. So we've not gone very high at all. Drop one vertebra at a time back into the floor until that pelvis touches the floor, and then that tailbone can level back out. We're going to repeat that again, tilting the pelvis up, tailbone goes up, and then one vertebra at a time peels away from the floor, and then slowly lowering one vertebra at a time back in. Now we're going to have a bit of a feel of the bum muscle, so get ready with your hands. Hands on the bum, it should be nice and relaxed to begin with. Tilt that tailbone up, you'll feel it engage a little bit more. And as you take that tailbone up towards the ceiling, just have a feel. Are they equally tense? You're not going to do much about it if they are not at the moment. So if one side feels a little bit more floppy than the other, then you know you've got a bit of work to do there. We're going to do a couple more repetitions and then we're going to move on. Okay, now if you feel like the hamstrings are getting a bit crampy, bring those heels in a little bit. It makes it a little bit easier. It takes some of the load out of the hamstrings and puts it into the glutes. But don't be tempted to go too high. In other words, I don't want you arching right up here. That makes the hamstrings do a little bit more than we like, and the lower back muscles. This one's trying to target those buttocks. Okay. Right, so we're going to take it up to level 2. Now we're going to be holding ourselves in the bridge once we're up there, and then we're going to try and take the weight off one foot. Now this is okay to do so long as you can keep the pelvis still. So we've got to use our imagination again here. We're going to tilt that tailbone up towards the ceiling, lifting one vertebra at a time. So when we get into our bridge, we're going to imagine that we've got a spirit level across the pelvis, just sat on the pelvis. Your fingertips are the sensors for that. And then what we're going to try and do is take the weight off your foot, slowly lift the heel, lift a toe, straighten that leg. Put that foot back down, heel goes down, slowly roll back out, making sure you do roll back into the floor. Now, this is where we've got to think again. We go up into the bridge. What happens on the side of the pelvis that you lift? So if I lift my foot on my right side here, think it's the left as you look at it. If my hip drops here, I'm not controlling that, that's no good. And if I can't do the movement without controlling it properly, I don't want you doing it at all, okay? So you have to make a judgment. You're going to try the other side. You may find one side you can stabilise and you can keep nice and level. One side is a little bit more of a challenge and you feel like you can't do it. So I've got a halfway house, an intermediate. So I'm up into my bridge, and I'm just going to take the lightest bit of weight off this foot, just lifting the heel, and as soon as I feel like the pelvis is shifting, that's it, back down, roll back out. So I'm de-weighting the foot. So whether you're de-weighting the foot or lifting, we're going to alternate sides, roll back down, gentle bridge again, opposite side, and we probably go for half a dozen on each side. And then we have a rest, and ideally, if you've got the time, do a couple of sets. I'm going to do one more on each side, so we're going to do this side, keeping that pelvis nice and level, straightening that knee, slowly rolling down, still keeping that chin tucked in. Sometimes, before you know it, your chin's poking up towards the ceiling because you're trying to cheat and help yourself with your neck muscles, so keep the chin tucked in toward your throat. It makes it a little bit easier, or a little bit easier on your neck at least. It means that your buttocks have to do a bit more. Okay, we're going to move on to something a little bit different now. We're going to do an exercise where we're going to be moving the shoulders, and we're going to be thinking about keeping the rib cage nice and still. So the movement starts in exactly the same position, chin tucked in, shoulder blades set down, neutral lumbar spine. So we do a few tilts, find our neutral, keep that there. And the movement's going to be to float both arms gently up towards the ceiling. Now for most of us, if your shoulder is healthy, you don't have any pain in it, you might be able to get all the way back until your thumbs or your hands touch the floor. Now, even if your shoulders are a little bit stiff, you will get there, but you might cheat a little bit by letting the lower back lift and lifting the rib cage. So here's the thing, we're going to have to try and check, are you cheating? So one hand on the rib cage, find that neutral lumbar spine, float the other hand up towards the ceiling, take it back behind you, and what happens at the end of the movement with that rib cage? Does the rib cage stay down, or do you feel like it starts to lift? When it starts to lift, that's where we have to stop, okay? And then we bring that back down. So we know at what point we can get to and where we have to stop. We do it on the other side just to see what the other side is like in comparison. If you've got a shoulder history, a bit of an injury in the past, you might find this is a bit of a stiff exercise.
And we could do this just on one arm at a time. It's probably a good idea to start on it as one arm at a time. And when you've done a couple on each side, we're then going to see, can we keep that rib cage still and lift both arms? Thinking about that neutral lumbar spine, not lifting from the floor, slowly back with those arms, slowly back down to your hips. Imagine that you've got a big beach ball in your hands and you're just lifting that back, taking it back, then bringing it back over. And all the time, we're not allowing that lower back to move. That rib cage does very little movement. And we probably do maybe another 2 or 3 repetitions here. And of course, we're breathing out as we take the arms back. We're breathing in as we bring them back over. 2 more reps. Last repetition. Okay, very good. Right, now, we're going to do a little mobilizer for the back. Bring the feet and knees together. Imagine the knees and ankles are bound together with rope. Imagine the shoulder blades are bolted to the floor. I'm going to pop my arms out to the side. I'm going to start with my head in the middle looking up. I'm going to roll my knees one way, but I'm going to roll my head the other. So as my knees roll one way and my head rolls to the other, I'm thinking about my shoulder blades. So my knees are going away over here. I'm thinking about this shoulder blade, making sure it doesn't lift. And then I'm going to slowly roll those knees back in to the middle, and I'm going to take it out in the opposite direction. Don't worry about going too far. Just do the movement that you can control. If you get too far, you'll start to feel like the rib cage here starts to lift away from the floor. You've gone too far if that's happening. Breathing out as you roll the knees away. Breathing in as you bring them back in. Nice and gentle. Pivoting on the outside border of your foot. Slowly controlling it back in. Pivoting on the outside border of your foot. Slowly controlling it back in. 1 more in each direction, and then we are done. Done with this exercise anyway. Okay, slowly back into the middle. Have a little rest there. Okay, now we're going to change position. I've got a little challenge for you now. We're going to come up onto hands and knees. Now this is going to be a little bit harder than what we've done before. It's a little bit like a mini plank. We're going to have our 4-point kneeling position. We're going to have our toes tucked under this time. We're going to have our hips over our knees, shoulders over wrists, neutral lumbar spine as we've had before. Imagine you've got that little football balanced into the small of the back. And now we're going to lift the knees just an inch from the floor, okay? So it's a little bit like a plank. The tummy muscles will be working a little bit as you get up into this position, but it's a lot easier to control than a plank. Now if you find this a bit of a challenge, and you feel like those tummy muscles are having to work a little bit, and those thigh muscles are having to work a little bit, and you're only just holding that neutral position, you can imagine if you get into a full plank, it is quite tough to get that one right. So we're going to hold that for about another 10 seconds if we can. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax down, have a little rest. We're going to do that once more. Think about keeping the chest lifted between the shoulder blades set down, chin tucked up in toward the throat as we keep this here, and don't be tempted to sway forwards. So again, if we can, if the toes can take it, lift the knees an inch away from the floor, hold that there, keep that football balanced in the small of the back. We're going to have about 20 seconds here in total. Keep breathing, don't hold your breath. Still breathing? Good. Right, let's go for 10. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and down. Okay, right then. We're going to get ourselves back up into standing to finish now. We're going to do the reverse of how you got down here. So we're going to do the roll down, but in reverse. So we come, bring the hands a little bit closer toward the knees, into a crouch. Keep the hands down, the head down. Straighten the knees, tailbone points to the ceiling so we get a bit of a stretch in the hamstrings, and then we slowly uncurl, stacking 1 vertebra at a time,
on top of a one below, and we'll do one more of those to finish off. Chin down into the chest, shoulder blades go down, rolling that spine forwards, one vertebra at a time, tailbone up to the ceiling to stretch the hamstrings, bring it back up, tucking that tailbone under, back into our neutral position, and we are done. Okay, so that was a bit of a beginner's session. There's plenty more where that came from. If you liked it, I'll do a little bit more. Hope you enjoyed. Share it with your friends, and I'll be doing more if you do. Lovely. See you later. Bye-bye.